Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone. It's your boy, MrDegenerate here, back at it again for another video. And you know what time it is. You know what fucking time it is. It's that time of the year where every YouTuber does a top 10 or top 5 or whatever the fuck number of their favorite movies, TV show, all that bullshit. And since I'm a sellout, I'm gonna do the same thing. Because I realized I watched a shit ton of movies this year compared to any other year. And so I was like, you know what? It probably might be fun to actually do a top 10 favorite movies of 2021. And I was really, this shit was harder than it fucking was. I was like, fuck me, this shit is hard. Because there was a lot of good hits that came out in 2021. And man, I was just sitting there, just analyzing every single movie, rethinking about certain movies that I watch, and it was a scary process, but overall, I think I'm satisfied with the final product, and I'm excited to tell you guys. But before we begin, I just want to say what's the rules of this video. First rule, it has to be a movie that came out 2021. It can't be a movie that came out 1975 or whatever other time period. It has to be a movie that came out, had a release date for 2021. And the last and only other rule I have for this, it cannot be a straight to DVD. So any of the DC animated movies, no, fuck off. You guys don't get your props. Don't worry, I got something for y'all, but no. This video is designed strictly for movies that had either a theater or a streaming release. And so I'm excited to talk about these movies, and let's get straight into it. Also, there will be honorable mentions, and also there will be timestamps in the description box below. So if you want to just skip to whatever movie, go for it. Let's start it off. Let's start it off kind of spicy. At first, I wasn't going to give this movie the top 10. In fact, it was about to be an honorable mention, but ultimately I think it deserved a top 10 only because of what it achieved. And that movie would be from my boy Zack Snyder, Justice League, the Snyder cut, as we all call it. And like I said, I wasn't gonna give this top 10, but why I decided to give this my personal top 10 is because while it isn't a perfect movie, and it is 4 hours fucking long, holy shit, it is tiring, and I never want to watch this movie again. I ultimately was fascinating in terms of a filmmaking point of view of how a simple change in an atmosphere, a simple music change, camera placement, simple adding of line or scene completely changes a whole film. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say what the Zack Snyder fans are saying, that this is a completely different movie. It's not, but the stuff it adds to this movie, it's so fascinating. This movie also, I think, does a really great job of just making certain characters that I found really not likable from Zack slightly better. Like, I really enjoyed, for the most part, I really enjoyed Cyborg. Cyborg was the standout character in the whole entire movie, and his whole arc and what he was going through was so good. I enjoyed it. The Flash, while still not my favorite, he's way more tolerable, and Batman actually acts like fucking Batman, which was impressive. This movie felt like a big thank you letter to the Snyder fans, and I don't know, I give the movie 10 times the props for going the distance and just doing whatever the fuck he wants. At this point, you're either with Zack or you're not, and I'm not really with him, but I see what he was trying to do. It's not what I personally care for from the DC universe, but after watching the movie, I was like, if we're gonna do multiverse, you might as well just say this is from a different universe and have Zack continuing, because some of the stuff he was setting up was actually kind of interesting. Is it something? Do I think this movie needs to be 4 hours long with a bunch of fucking slow-mos? No. But ultimately, in terms of filmmaking, I think this is exactly what people wanted from a fucking Justice League movie, being epic and grand. And that is something that I do not think the Whedon cut, which there's some elements of that movie I really do enjoy. Ultimately, I would prefer this cut rather than the Whedon cut, because it just feels epic, it feels right, and most importantly, it kind of flows. It flows with what Zack Snyder intended. Unlike Whedon's cut, where it just felt like course correction the movie, and it just felt weird. Like things just felt off and weird about that movie. But nonetheless, that is why it's my number 10. An amazing movie. Congratulations, Zack. You can sail off into sunset. You made a fun movie. Good luck in your other adventures. And the Snyder fans, you did it. You got your reward. So kudos to you guys. Let's give out our first honorable mentions. Our first honorable mention will go to a little movie that came out this year that everybody thought was amazing and was great and everybody loved, but I just wasn't. It wasn't something that I was extremely in love with, although I did enjoy it. Dune. Dune. Oh, how can I describe this movie? This movie is a very interesting movie. I would say this, like it is a very fascinating movie in terms of lore and in terms of characters. I think this universe is very fascinating, and the director of this movie made a beautiful movie. Like this, the way how some of the things in this movie works, and the architects and all that shit, and how the world works in general, is just fantastic. And even how the powers and how the powers are demonstrated in this movie, like the voice, it's so incredible. It's so cool. That being said, the reason why it is on my honorable mention and why it didn't make the cut, it's pretty simple. And I admit this is gonna come off bias. I wasn't really interested in so much of this movie because of it not really answering a lot of questions. In fact, this movie is literally half of a story. So I just kind of was wasn't really invested that much. The world is interesting and the characters are somewhat interesting, but I was I'm not too involved, and it suffers the same problem I've had with another movie that I love way more than this, which is Battle Angel Alita. Battle Angel Alita was a really cool ass movie that no one remembers, but it is really a good movie. But my biggest complaint, even when I watched it, I was unless you read the manga or unless you did your research, this movie does not do a good job of answering those questions, and it's one part of a story, and it's praying that we'll do well enough to get a sequel. And I really love Battle Angel Alita, so to see this movie succeed and it's gonna get a sequel and Battle Angel Alita doesn't get one, I don't know, that kind of bothers me when it literally is doing the same exact problems Battle Angel Alita. It's oh well, we hope you guys enjoyed this movie so we can give you a sequel and not explain shit. So much of this movie is not explained at all. But like I said, what kept me going was the world and where they're going. It's interesting enough to see where they're going, so that's why it's on my honorable mentions. But yeah, I admit it's a little biased because I look at that Battle Angel Lita and see that it didn't get a sequel, and I look at this movie and it's getting a sequel, and it's like, whatever. Hopefully in the sequel it improves. Hopefully it's way more interesting and whatnot. But yeah, like this movie was interesting, but didn't make the cut. And for number 9, I gotta give it to the John Wick ripoff. Nobody. Nobody was this really cool action movie, which is really just like, what if John Wick had a family and he was a fucking loser and just a normal average Joe, and shit just pops off and he has to go fuck shit up. I really enjoyed this movie. This movie was hilarious because it has a lot of funny moments that's unintentionally funny for me. But what ultimately sold it for me was the actor. Like, I know he's from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. The name escapes me. I know it's Bob something, but the way how he did all his action scenes in here was incredible. And the thing I love so much about this is, unlike John Wick, which is this is clearly a rip-off of John Wick, but what I love so much about it was that the main character, he throughout the whole movie is not this indestructible man. In fact, you could tell he's been off his game a lot. And throughout the whole movie, he's just getting fucked up. Towards the end, of course, it becomes a whole shoot 'em up, bang bang. But for the most part, all the fight scenes in this movie was very hand-to-hand combat, and I was very impressed. Like, there was barely any gunfights, unlike John Wick, so that was impressive. And I think the same person who directed Hardcore Henry directed this movie, so the action scenes and a lot of the choreograph was like really spot on and really good. It doesn't do the typical Hollywood shit where the camera's fucking shaking and cutting 24/7 because, you know, Hollywood can't do action well anymore. So it was just a fucking beautiful thing, like, to just see good action done right. And like I said, the movie is just a blast. I don't have much to say on it, but you know, I would highly recommend it. Especially if you're into John Wick, this is kind of like a parody of John Wick in all the right ways. And also, I gotta say, the editing in here and how it cuts to scenes and whatnot is so good. Again, really like this movie. It kind of flew by my radar at first, but then I was like, oh, well, I remember this movie. Yeah, like, this movie was fucking dope. So, number 9 goes to Nobody. Another honorable mentions go to a movie that, while I was rolling my eyes as I was watching it, ultimately I was kind of enthralled by every minute of it in a weird way, was Candyman. Let's try not to say that motherfucker's name too much in this video, but Candyman was a very interesting movie in the typical sense that it really is this movie that has a lot to say about, of course, police brutality and whatnot, but none of that really interests me in the slightest. In fact, I think that's what brought the movie down to ultimately honorable mentions to me. I didn't care for the messaging of this movie all too much, but what I did love is how it tied into the whole idea of Candyman, of making him an urban legend, and how, like, different generations have their own Candyman, and also how they tie it back into each other, and how we as humans have created urban legends for years, and every generation they change and thwart the legend to fit in with modern times. And I think what the movie was saying about that was cool. My ultimate problem and why it got the honorable mention but did not make it on the list is, ultimately, I just could not fucking stand this movie beating me over the head about police brutality is bad. White people are evil. So Candyman's gonna kill all the white people. And that's it. Like, I get the point, and I understand what it was going for. But the problem with the movie, and spoilers, there's one part of the movie where the main character is showing off his artwork, because he's an artist. He's showing off his artwork to this person, to this critic, and he completely, without even letting the critic interpret it their own way, he beats it over her head about the message behind the art. And it's like, let me come to my own conclusion. You have a good shit over here. Let me come to my own conclusion to this. But the movie kind of beats you over the head with its messaging, that it kind of got a little annoying for me. But overall, this movie I still would recommend, especially if you've seen the other Candymans, which I haven't. But the way how the movie does a really great job, due to the theme of urban legends, tying it back to those movies. And I was just very interested about this movie. This movie was really interesting. So shout outs to this director who did this movie. If I'm not mistaken, and please quote me on this, I believe this director is also going to be directing the Marvels, the Captain Marvel 2. So I'm looking forward now. After seeing this movie, I'm like, I think she might got it, man. I think she's gonna kill it. So we'll see. Number 8, I gotta give it up to the Green Man himself, the Green Knight. And the reason why I gave it to the Green Knight is because the Green Knight, while it's not gonna be for everyone, it is a slog of a movie. It is really taking its time to really enthrall you in this journey, this quest to ultimately for this character to die, to pay a debt. It is not going to be for everyone, but for those who really, really stick with it and really pay attention to the little cute things and a little bit of the nuance in the movie, you'll get a beautiful movie out of this. And one of the things that ultimately sold me on this movie and why it's on this list is the theme or the ideas that it presents of the hero's journey. It is really a story of the reconstruction of the hero's journey. It gives it in a different perspective of what if on the hero's journey, for those that don't know, is basically what it takes to become the hero of the story. What if the main character, instead of executing all his tasks perfectly and becoming the hero, what if throughout the whole entire journey the hero constantly fucks up on every part of the fucking journey? And I found it very interesting because usually in modern movies and modern shows, when you look at a character like Luke Skywalker, he may have failed one of his quests or whatever, but for the most part he always passes all the others. You look at someone like Neo from the Matrix, he learns and he grows and he becomes the hero that you need him to be. But the main character of this story, he's literally going through the story basically being a shitty ass knight, and he's supposed to be eventually the king, and throughout the whole movie he's doing nothing to really earn that title of kingship. And I love how different that was and how interesting it was to see that, and also what he learns on his journey and what the journey says about him was very interesting. And how what the journey even means to be a knight around that times was interesting. And I also love that this movie wasn't just a story about King Arthur. This could easily be about, I have to I have to be like King Arthur, and this is how it needs to be, and this is how it is, and whatnot, and this is the King Arthur way and whatnot. And King Arthur could have took up the whole entire fucking movie, and he does not. He's in it for like what, 20, 30 minutes, and then that's it. He is fucking gone. And the rest of the movie is about this fucking guy trying to learn how to be a true knight and completely failing. But that's what makes it so great. And the restraint that they had for this was really cool. And it's just a beautiful movie as well. Some of the way how people look and characters looks extremely well. Especially there's one point where you get to like the giants or the titans as I call them, and it looks really fucking cool. Like really dope. And I really love this movie. Like, this movie was a really shocking movie to experience. I was actually kind of shocked how much I enjoyed it. So for number 8, it goes to The Green Knight. Another honorable mentions has to go to my symbiote buddy, and I know people are gonna be like, "What the fuck? Don't put this movie on honorable mention. This shit deserves the fucking worst movie of the year." But I'm gonna give it to Venom. Let There Be Carnage, aka Venom 2. I really enjoyed Venom 2 a lot. Despite it having some really bad dialogue, despite it having some really stupid ass plot, despite it having just mediocre shit throughout the whole entire movie, the one thing that kept it going for me was the banter between Eddie and Venom. They're fucking hilarious, bros. Like, I could not stop dying laughing and stop cheesing of how silly these two are. Like, they're like a fucking dumbass, broken ass couple arguing over stupid shit 24/7, and it was hilarious. Like, I was in shock of how much time I was enjoying how silly it was. What does that mean the movie's great? No. When we get to Carnage is fine. There's literally a part where Carnage does a fucking tornado move, and the character that people who get swept under it start making these weird ass sound effects, and it's hilarious to me. This movie's hilarious. And also, the movie just doesn't work for Carnage because it's rated PG-13, so it just doesn't work. And I don't think Venom works without Spider-Man. I'm sorry, I know Venom fans are gonna lose their fucking mind when I say this, but I just don't think Venom works without establishing Spider-Man first. However, this movie was so fucking hilarious. I can name you so many scenes that had me dying laughing. There's literally a scene where Venom comes out the closet, talks about coming out the closet, and I was just like, what? That's fucking stupid, but I love it. This movie reminds me of a early 2000s comic book movie / a early, like, PS1, Nintendo 64, Spider-Man, the video game Venom, where he just fucking silly throughout the whole game.
Open this door!
Who is it? Like, I don't know if anybody remembers that game, but Venom in that is hilarious. And in this, they just turned him up. It's like he came from a fucking video game, bro. And I love it. Also, I think the reason why I love this movie a lot, because it's something different. You know, in a day and age where Marvel Studios has their grip on the world of comic book movies, it was very fascinating and very fun to watch a comic book movie just remind us of the silver age of fucking comic book movies, and how really shitty they were. So, I don't know. I really enjoyed this movie, and it was a great fresh air from all the MCU shit that we usually get. That being said, it's still not that great of a movie, but whatever. Still gets an honorable mention, though. 7, I gotta give it to the Blast from the Past movie. Last Night in Soho. It's Edgar Wright's, man. Like, what do y'all want from me? If anybody knows me, I really enjoy Edgar Wright's movies. Up to this day, I'm still upset that we never got to see his version of Ant-Man. But Edgar Wright as a director is just an amazing dude. I enjoyed a lot of his movies, and this is his first time doing a horror movie. And for the most part, I thought this movie was very, very fascinating. It's very stylized. It's very beautiful, and I do like the main character. And Ella Taylor Johnson is her name. She did an amazing job with the performance. But most importantly, I want to give huge shout outs to the actress who did the main character. She played the character very very a down to earth character, and I actually kind of felt bad for her throughout the whole movie because I was like, Jesus, is this where niggas are always harassing y'all? Fuck me. But I think what ultimately sold me on this movie and why I loved it and why I genuinely had a good time with this movie is one, the soundtrack. The soundtrack, they hit me with some oldies slash goodies. So automatically the movie was a banger. Like I literally, after watching the movie, looked up the soundtrack because I had to get my old school music in. But ultimately, why I love this movie is this movie has a lot to say about romanticizing things. And in particular, the idea of romanticizing time periods and the danger of doing that. And as someone who always romanticized back in the day, like the 80s, the 60s, the 70s, or whatever, it was good for a movie to come in and be like, motherfucker, you know nothing about the time periods. In fact, those time periods was fucking rough. Very rough, especially if you were a woman. It was fucking rough. Like the whole premise of this movie is that this girl literally is seeing a glimpse of basically a prostitute getting coerced into being a prostitute. Like, it's crazy. And as someone who is like very pro into sex work, very pro sex work despite doing it, it was very interesting learning about that time period and what women had to go through if you wanted to be a showgirl, like some of the scary parts of it. So as someone who always romanticized the time periods as well, this movie did a great job of saying like, yo, like, love was not that simple back in the day, chief. Yeah, you may think it's hard now, but back then they had it just as bad as well. Women had it just as bad as everybody if they wanted to make it big. Like, come on, chief. So ultimately, I really love this movie. The only problem I have with the movie is when it tries to be a horror movie, I think it kind of flunks, because you can just tell Edgar Wright never did horror, and it kind of shows. But that being said, in terms of stories, in terms of character, in terms of the look and the feel of the movie, I think One Night in Soho was like Last Night in Soho was a really cool movie, and shout outs to Edgar Wright for flexing his muscles and doing something completely different. Another honorable mentions, I'm gonna make this one quick. Judas and the Black Messiah. I thought this movie was really fucking good. I was very impressed by this movie only because how I grew up and how the Black Panthers are portrayed in other medias and whatnot. They never really show how much the Black Panther movement has done for not only just the Black community, but it really showed the different side of the Black Panthers that I don't think many people realize had. And I'm ultimately glad I watched this movie because it really did show a side of the Black Panthers that I didn't see, which is that they really were for their community. There are many times and many depictions in this movie where they were just helping out homeless black people, making sure kids were able to eat and get school education. But ultimately, what I found interesting is that the simple fact that one man literally took up arms and was like, let's unite, threw everything off course. They were like, no, we can't have this. Like, yeah, you stick with your own people, but you're uniting other factions. You're uniting people who don't even like each other to come together on a huge important cause. Like, no. And the simple fact that it was your own people, your own fucking people, that snitched you out. You know, it was really resonating with me. I don't know. This movie spoke to me, and I usually don't watch movies like this, but this movie spoke to me, and I highly recommend it if you get the chance. Even if you're someone who, like me, who's burnt out of like movies like this, I would still recommend it. I think it's got a wonderful cast. I think everyone does a great job, and I think just the depiction of black people in general was very interesting. Especially the depiction of the Black Panther movement was very interesting because I think it showed a light that I've never seen before, and I'm ultimately happy about that. So go watch Judas and the Black Messiah. For number 6, I gotta get up to this weird ass James Wan movie called *Malignant*. Like, Jesus Christ, James Wan. James Wan is a fucking madman. I have never watched his horror movies. I think my first James Wan movie is Saw and also Aquaman. So I'm getting used to James Wan's wonkiness. But this shit was just off the fucking chain. Like, *Malignant* did not have to be this kind of crazy, risk-taking movie, but it really is. When it first starts off, it's kind of weird and it's kind of generic. It's all about this girl who is seeing dead people, and then you find out later on that the dead people are actually real. Like, she's witnessing murders and they turn out to be real, and I'm just like, all right, cool. And at first I'm just like, okay, this is kind of boring, this is kind of whack. But when you get to the second and especially the third half, this movie does some crazy ass shit that I'm just like, what the fuck? It gets super campy and super off the rails, but I enjoyed every minute of it. And it just goes to show you that you really have to be a huge filmmaker or a really profound filmmaker to get your movie made. Because I feel like if any other movie had came out that tried to do something like this, it wouldn't have gotten made. Hollywood does not like taking risk. It does not like putting out movies like this unless you're a filmmaker who is like a Christopher Nolan or someone like James Wan who's proven himself. This one felt epic. This felt so silly, but in all the right ways. It gets really crazy and creative near the end, and I'm just like, what the fuck? And at first, you're not gonna get this movie. You're not gonna understand it at first unless you like pick up on the first actual clue at the beginning of the movie. After that, the movie becomes a fucking trailblazer, and it is. I'm very shocked and I'm very like surprised. What made this movie even more special for me, this was my last Halloween movie that I watched on Halloween Day. So it just clicked to me. Like, the campy nature of it just clicked to me near the end. And it was just this really fun movie. And I highly recommend people check it out. Last but not least, for my honorable mentions, I'm going to give this to a special Law and Order episode called The Last Duel. And The Last Duel is called the Law and Order episode because it is basically what you assume. It is basically a rape victim coming out and telling her side of the story, but also the husband and also the rapist giving their perspective and their own story. that's what makes this movie so fascinating. It is that it is literally a Law and Order case, but you learn from different people's perspective on what the fuck happened to and what led up to this situation. And what I love so much about this movie, or what I thought was very creepy about it, was that no one gave a fuck about what this woman was feeling or what this woman had to say or whatever. It just kind of was like the men were all fighting because they all had beef with one another that the women had nothing to do prior to the incident. So it was more like we're doing this for the lady, but not really. Everybody's doing it for themselves. Everyone had their own vendetta, and nobody was really looking out for what the victim was going. It's kind of fucked up. This movie's very fucked up, but I think the standout performance was surprisingly Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck was playing this like king, and the way how he played him was really, really charismatic and really nice. It was good to see Ben Affleck act his ass off again. And this movie is just so fascinating. When you get one part of the story, it adds on and it is interesting. But then when you get another part of the story, it contradicts one story and it completely changes the dynamic of a scene. This movie was just a fascinating movie. The reason why it is not on my list, and to wrap it up on why it wasn't on my list, it's pretty simple. I just saw other movies that were way more interesting. This movie was really good, but I didn't love it, and it's not gonna be a movie for everyone. This movie is really for those who's into this style of movies, like medieval stuff and whatnot. But how it told its story, I thought was really fascinating and really cool. But it is not for everybody. So for the director, Ridley Scott, to come out and blame young people for not going up and seeing movies and whatnot, and blaming the MCU fans for why his movie didn't do well. Blame the studio, buddy, because you made a bomb-ass movie. It's just not for everybody, because this movie, it's not that it's boring, but it's not, I can easily look at it and I'm like, this is not gonna be for everybody. This is like some experimental movie, and not everyone's gonna want that. So it is what it is. I just found other movies more entertaining than this, but what it was saying and how the story was told was very fascinating. So that being said, that's all I got to say on that. We are at the home stretch. Hopefully this is going to get more easier for me, but top 5, we are at a top 5. So my number 5 movie is going to go to a little movie called No Time to Die. Now, this movie may not be the perfect James Bond movie. In fact, still up to this day, my favorite James Bond movie is Casino Royale. Daniel Craig's first James Bond adventure is still Casino Royale, then Skyfall. But this movie, why it's so high on the list and why I love it so much, is because it takes everything you know about James Bond from all of these this Daniel Craig iteration of James Bond. It takes all of his story beats, it takes everything about the character and gives him a great finality. Like, I know a lot of people did not like, in particular, the ending of this movie, but ultimately I was on board with everything the movie was throwing at me, and I felt it was very fitting for the character of James Bond. Because James has always lived his life as a playboy-esque person, but deep down inside, you always got the sense that he always wanted more, that he always wanted a family, he always wanted a girl he cares about, and in this, he gets that, and then throws it away, and then gets it again near the end. And for me, this movie just felt so satisfying. To see him grow as a character, to just every single woman he wanted to fuck down. Now he's just kind of like, yo, you're a woman. I respect you. Let's get our shit together. And how it wraps up the trilogy was just great. This is a very fitting ending to Bond. I don't understand why some people hate it, but I also understand why some people did not go and see this movie or wasn't in love to go see this movie. You really have to be into James Bond, and also like James Bond as a character has been more for the older generation, and you know this one was dope. I even like the new 007, the new black 007. I actually love her because she's so fixated on the fucking 007 mantle, and Bond throughout the whole movie doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. It really shows how the growth of the character, and that's the biggest takeaway I took from this movie. And what I love about it is to see how far Daniel Craig's Bond is, from going this playboy spy character to this humble man who's willing to let people in and have friendships with people, who's willing to work aside a woman and not just see her as a sex object. Just very much changing, I guess, in a positive way, James Bond as a character. Because you can't get away with shit like this no more. So you gotta make James Bond kind of in his feelings. And I love it. Daniel Craig's James Bond is still my James Bond, so I guess that's why I love this James Bond so much, and why I thought the ending was poignant for his character. So number 4, we gotta give it up to the 10 Rings. Shang-Chi and the 10 Rings. My God. If somebody would have told me this movie would have been dope, I would have said, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, I was not expecting Shang-Chi to be as good or as fascinating as it was. I was really thinking this movie was going to be a misfire, and it really turned out to be a really smash hit. Like, I would say this is one of the strongest MCU movies this year. And also I think it's one of the strong solo / origin movies I've seen in a Marvel in a while. Like, just the world it's created and the characters are very fascinating. But the thing that stood out to me the most is how fantastic the fight choreography was in this movie. Like, I was blown the fuck away. This movie wears, and this is the hugest positive I'll give the movie, it wears its Asian influence on its sleeves and embraces it full-heartedly. And I love it for that. It goes from this Jackie Chan great fight choreography where you can actually see what the fuck is going on. There's no shaking cam, there's no anything. And I was just stunned. I was like, Marvel made this? No way a Marvel movie knows how to do good fight scenes. And on the level of fucking like John Wick. That's how crazy some of this shit was. And then it gets to its epic anime weeaboo shit near the end, and it looks fantastic. It looks like a fucking Tekken game at some point. And I mean that in all positive. The movie wears its influence. But one of the things the biggest takeaway of the character that I took away from was the Mandarin. They completely did a 180 on Mandarin's character. They listened to the criticism people's had with the Mandarin not being present in the MCU, and the time we did hear about him was in Iron Man 3. And this movie addresses that and literally single-handedly fixed Iron Man 3, which is crazy to me. And yes, I know there's All Hail the King that technically speaking fixed Iron Man 3, but this movie goes out its way, and to me it has one of the strongest MCU villains in a long time with the Mandarin, because the whole premise of the Mandarin is that he just wants to get his fucking wife back and reunite his family, but he goes about it in the complete wrong ways. And I just found that compelling, interesting. Again, I'm a sucker for romance, so I loved it, and I felt his pain. The way how the rings work in here, like shit, they give Captain America's shield a run for his money. That's how cool these shits are. And this movie is just great. Like, the cast is really good. I love the cast. I love the actor who plays Shang-Chi. Ever since he made it to Marvel, he's been blowing up big. I see him like on everything now. Aquafina did great. I love their relationship. I'm glad this movie didn't do the whole, their romance shit. I'm glad that they're just friends. I even like Shang-Chi's sister. And the way how she's depicted in here, I actually felt bad for her. I was like, motherfucker, you should be the new Mandarin. And I'm not gonna spoil, but yeah, I was like, you should be the Mandarin. Because you have some of your dad's ideology, and you run a fucking club. Like, you should do it. And this movie's just great. This movie is just beautiful. It's great. My only negative about this movie is the typical fucking Marvel problem. The third act. I don't know what is with Marvel in their third acts, but the third act in this shit was fucking garbage. It gets a little too CGI, a little bit too much, but it never takes away, and ultimately why I love this movie so much, it never takes away about the story of Shang-Chi and his father, and how that relationship ultimately, and where that relationship ultimately leads. That's why I call this movie the Tekken movie, because it is literally some Tekken blood feud shit that I love so much in Tekken. So overall, I enjoyed the movie. I don't think I have any much to say about this movie. It's definitely a movie I think everybody should check out, especially if you're into Kung Fu. There's so much elements that they use. I talked about the Jackie Chan influence. I talk about the anime over the topness, but they also use Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon at one point. Yo, this movie just all over the fucking place in terms of influence that I love. So go check it out. Number 3, I gotta give it up to my movie. I gotta give it up to it. I did a video on it, so it was coming. I gotta give it up to DC's Guardians of the Galaxy, aka The Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad is such a fucking banging ass movie. This movie represents to me everything I say DC can be when they get their shit together. When DC is firing at all cylinders, they make banging ass movies like this. And if only they be more fucking consistent, they will always win. They will be on the same level as Marvel. But the simple fact that they are not consistent, they are not reaching up to Marvel. But that being said, this movie may be, to a lot of people, just Guardians of the Galaxy turned up. And I've even said that in my review. But one of the things I do appreciate about that statement in all the positive ways is that, just like Guardians, they took characters that are either non-recognizable or unlikable and genuinely made me care about them. Like, genuinely put some heart into these fucking villains, these despicable people. From Ratcatcher 2 to Bloodsport to all these characters in the movie. Polka Dot Man, the fucking lamest fucking villain you ever could imagine, gets general moments of humanity and like heroism. And this movie's just fucking great. This movie follows on all cylinders. It's very stylish. It's very cool. It's very in your face. And just thank James Gunn for fucking coming on board and helping out DC, because this movie was a banger. This movie is not for everyone though. Some of the humor is very dark. is like extremely dark. Like I keep thinking about that scene where they massacred the fucking spoilers, when they massacre the fucking resistance group. Like that joke, that shit had me dying. But even I was like, oh, that's fucked up. But that's hilarious. But I'm glad the movie embraced it. I'm glad that the movie went for it. And I would probably argue maybe the first half of the movie would have been way more cooler if they started killing off the team slowly but surely. But other than that, this movie had heart, and I recognize this heart, and I highly recommend people go watch it. I know it didn't do well at the box office, but I'm glad DC and Warner Brothers took a chance with it, and you created a beautiful ass movie for it. So, thank you. And our number 2, also runner-up for movie of the year, goes to The Harder They Fall. The Harder They Fall. Oh man, this was a Netflix movie that no one I knew watched, which I feel bad because this movie was fucking badass. Like, this movie is this Western movie, typical Western plot, which is these group of people come together to basically take revenge on this other group of outlaws. And at first I was like, all right, this is going to be generic. That sounds generic. But once you get into it, man, this movie's banging. The music, the cast, everything about this movie just is in your face and it pops. Like, it is so fucking cool. If you're not into Western movies, I think this will probably change your mind or keep you at least entertained, because while the plot is kind of simple, it is fascinating. And one of the things I took away from this movie and why I ultimately love this movie, because it's very relatable to me, is the idea of family trauma, in particular sins of the family, and how the sins of the family can ultimately create and alter your future. And I was very, very intrigued by what this movie was saying. I will leave a link in the description box below of a YouTuber who talks about this theme way better than me. But if I was to say, like, I was so intrigued on what this movie was saying about that in particular, because as a black dude growing up in a household of a family who's very dysfunctional due to past circumstances, I related so hard on what the message of this movie and certain characters talking about their past with their family, I was like, and what shaped them out to be how they are, was very compelling. Like, I was like, that like kind of rings a bell to kind of like my family in a lot of ways. I'm not trying to get into too much detail, but suffice it to say, I was really enthralled by this movie and what it was saying on that end. And that's really about it about this movie. This movie was a blast to watch. And the soundtrack is fucking dope. Alright? I keep telling y'all, just give me cool ass soundtracks and I'll fucking love it. Alright? I'll fucking watch your movie. Alright? Just keep giving me great soundtracks and I'll love it. But go watch this movie. This movie was a banger. This is one of my favorite movies, and probably would have been my favorite movie of the year if for not for one movie. That one movie, the number one movie. And finally, my favorite movie of the year, my number one, the creme de la creme movie, has to go to, drum roll please, Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, this is a no-brainer for anybody who's been following me on Twitter and whatnot, and my friends know and everybody knows. I fucking love this movie. This movie is everything I've been begging and pleading the fucking Marvel to make since the exception of the MCU Spider-Man. This feels like everything I ever wanted in a Spider-Man movie, then more. This movie, I walked in with nothing but cynicalism. I was so cynical. I was like, this movie's not gonna be good. It's gonna be shit. Everybody's lying to me. It cannot be good. And the moment I walked in that fucking theater, I sat my ass down and was ready to fucking hate it. And it's a particular scene where a fucking lawyer comes. I was like, I'm all in. This fucking movie's gonna blow my fucking balls up. And the amount of times the movie goes out its way to not just be a movie about me, because it's not about a movie about me or addressing all the criticisms I've had with the MCU Spider-Man or answering a particular fan base. No, this movie is an amalgamation of the whole Spider-Man community. This movie is a love letter to us Spider-Man fans. This movie just fucking nails it. This movie has everything a Spider-Man fan would want. I can't imagine you're a Spider-Man fan and walking out of this movie saying, oh, I didn't like it. I can't imagine you. Then you're not you know what? Let me not say that. I was about to say you're not a Spider-Man fan. But I just could not imagine, after everything the movie throws at you, you walk out miserable and not happy. I genuinely, I felt like Tom Holland at the premiere. I genuinely walked out with tears flowing out my eyes, tears of happiness that after 5 fucking years of arguing with the Spider-Man fan community, the MCU Spider-Man fans, stans, everybody, to finally, for one movie, bring us all together and hug it out and be like, this is the movie for us. For one movie. It felt so good. And for me, this movie is not about the Spider-Verse stuff or the team up or the multiverse shit that they do with Doctor Strange. It's none of that. To me, it is a human story of a hero learning the weight and the consequences of his decisions. And that's all I ever wanted from a fucking Spider-Man movie. And I felt it in this movie. I felt it. I was breathing that shit in, and I fucking love it for that. This movie it's just a blessing in disguise. Up to this day, I still get shivers down my spine watching this movie, because it is generally a fucking joyous movie. Despite how bleak it is such a hopeful and optimistic movie, and I fucking loved every minute of it. It's like the first act, but this movie is everything I wanted a Spider-Man movie to be. I can now go to heaven and rest knowing I don't ever have to argue with the MCU Spider-Man fans. I don't ever have to argue with the MCU Spider-Man community about who's the better fucking Toby, who's better, Toby, Andrew, or fucking Tom. This movie doesn't do this, or oh, this was always part of the plan. This was thing. They didn't fix anything. You guys are all stupid. I don't give a fuck about any of that shit no more. You want to know why? Because the movie isn't about all that. It doesn't matter whether it was craving to one person or another person or not. The movie is generally nothing but love. So for me, that is why it's my favorite movie of the year. It is a movie nothing but love. And for one moment, it was so great. For one feeding moment, it was great to just, for once, not argue who was the best Spider-Man. It was great to not hear, oh, you're fucking wrong about the MCU Spider-Man. It was so great to just everybody just be in love with Spider-Man. And that's all I can ask for. That's all I can ask for as a Spider-Man fan. All that being said, that's my top 10. Feel free to tell me your top 10 or just top 5 or your number 1 favorite movie of the year in the comment section. Please comment, rate, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And stay tuned. More videos are coming. Take care. Bye-bye.